Yeah. So, how do we transition, Chevry, from a conversation? Of course, I mean, it's serious about HIV and AIDS and also COVID-19, but a conversation also about sex. And go now to Councilmember Robert White. There's no correlation, folks. I am not trying to make a correlation.
Well, I am a huge fan of us helping us in the work that they do. So I'm part of their fan base.
Well, that was a perfect segue 'cause I was trying to figure out how to make it work. Congratulations to you too, Councilmember White. You are back, reelected to the council for, I guess is this your
Second term,
second
yes.
term? Right,
Thank you.
right. Because
Yeah,
you served a shorter term and now you're back for, or I may have it all wrong, but anyway, you're back, and that's what's
I'm back.
important. And it seemed like it was going to be a shoe-in for you, although there were 20 some folks that ran for the at-large seat. How did that feel when you saw these people?
The 24, I mean, for the sake of democracy, I don't mind. I have a belief that if you get elected to work on behalf of the people, it's a privilege, and you never have to treat a position as yours. It is the people's position. And if they support the work that you've done, they'll put you back. So I don't mind the number of people from that standpoint, but it was hard for voters to distinguish between candidates. You can't research deeply 24 candidates. And so that was a difficulty, but we didn't take the election for granted. We developed a strong strategy and worked hard to execute because you never know until it's done. And just very happy that the voters put me back in the seat.
So, you are chair of a committee which takes a little seniority, a little tiny bit of seniority, right, to become chair of a committee?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so is this your committee? I had it here. I'm sorry. Is
Committee on
the
Facilities and Procurement.
Right, right.
Yes.
That doesn't sound too sexy to me. So what is that all about?
It's not sexy, but it's really in my policy bailiwick, and you got to be here to do the work even when it's not sexy. So we have jurisdiction over almost all DC government public buildings and construction, but also over most government contracts. And so you're talking about jurisdiction of a committee that goes into the billions of dollars and really impacts families in ways that we don't think about every day. It's not sexy, but it impacts us every single day. I also do have jurisdiction over the office of the ANC and over returning citizens affairs, and we've done a ton of work in those areas as well.
On that note, I didn't really plan to talk to you about this, but we just learned that DC jail and the complex over there is its own ANC, and that there's I guess, an objective by local residents and maybe even yourself to try to make sure that that seat is filled. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the DCL is its own ANC. The District of Columbia broadly, has invested a lot in making sure that our residents, even if they are temporarily residing in DC jail, can vote. And so it's become its own ANC, although to my knowledge, no one has ever been seated in that seat. And I spoke to some of the guys over at DC jail just a few weeks ago, and they expressed interest in making sure it gets filled. That's something that I absolutely support. The thing that I haven't been able to figure out though is that the ANC term is 2 years, and people should not be in DC jail for 2 years. It wasn't set up as a long term detention facility, so there are some difficult logistical issues. But I am hoping that we can find a way to have the residents at DC jail have a vote in our or have a voice in our government.
So the new council comes, will be sworn in, a couple of new members to the council, and yourself, those that are returning in January. What can we look forward to in 2021, particularly from you and your committees in the new year?
Well, part of what I'm going to do in the new year is really understanding where we are, the difficulties that we are seeing from COVID-19, the impacts that it's having on our local businesses. I'm going to be pushing the government to do more spending with our local businesses. We have very strong CBE laws that require government contracts to either go to or be subcontracted with local companies. But we have to now go beyond the law and understand that every taxpayer dollar that we are spending, if we are not really spending it with a local company, then we are doing a disservice to the entire city because we have an obligation to help keep those businesses afloat. But I also want to, and talking about something that's not sexy, I really want to analyze, or I'm going to analyze some of the inefficiencies we have in government, properties that we're sitting on that we don't need, spending that we're doing that we don't have to spend, because we have to reduce as much of this burden as possible on real people. And I don't want to see tax dollars go up as a way to maintain our current level of government services. So I'm doing a deep dive into our government efficiencies and making sure that they work, but also continuing to support ANCs and returning citizens in real ways. We've done a lot of work to expand and strengthen those agencies over the past 2 years, and I'm going to continue to build on that.
Well, that's great, and we're glad. So will you stay on this committee, or will you get reassigned when the council comes back with the chair and the rest of the members?
Well, only Chairman Mendelson really knows. He recommends the committee appointments, but I plan to remain chair of this committee.
Is there anything that you have seen over the past year, and you're an at-large council member, so you have a perspective of the whole city, we think, we believe,
I do.
including, I mean, I know you're a resident of Ward 4, but there's Ward 7 and 8 that often feels sort of disenfranchised in a lot of ways. But the impact of this virus, I mean, where do you think efforts or should be placed in sort of making people whole? Is it in the area of housing? Is it healthcare? Um,
Um, yeah, the efforts, the gaps that exist really are the gaps that existed coming into COVID. And these are the places that we have to strengthen. So housing, when the moratorium on eviction ends, we know that there are so many people who lost their jobs or lost hours in their jobs because of COVID-19, and they won't be able to pay their rent. So we face possibly massive evictions in the city if we don't do something. With respect to education, many of our students, especially students of color, students with special needs, and those who for whom English is a second language, they are really struggling with distance learning. And I think realistically, uh, most of our kids will not be back in the school building this school year. So we have to strengthen distance learning and the opportunity for in-person learning, but really prioritizing those at-risk children with special needs and English language learners. And those are no small feats. And so our government really, both the executive branch and the legislative branch, have to come together in a real way and create solutions there because the people are struggling. My wife and I have two kids. You may have heard my youngest calling for me in the background. She's in her high chair. But I always think about the people who have less resources and less flexibility than my family has. And I know how much we're struggling right now. The average family is really having a hard go of it, and the government has to do everything we can to ease that burden.
One of the reasons why there are lots of reasons why we started Win TV, but one of them was to find another way to reach, residents in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. And I'm wondering how, since COVID has happened and you aren't able to have these, hearings, and people have always been concerned about, well, how can we get more people to the hearings? Well, now everybody has access because we know and I'm curious if you've observed a greater audience for the council hearings now that you are, everyone knows where to find you.
Yes.
And also, how do you solicit, and this is pretty much my last question, but how do you solicit information from constituents? What's the best way for them to communicate with you about what their needs are?
Well, in terms of communication, communicate with me in any way that works for you. Call my office. You can still get through to us, 724-8174. Email me at rwhite@dccouncil.us, or reach out to me via social media. when things are moving, it is so helpful for me to hear from residents about their perspectives, because I try my best to be around the city, especially outside of COVID, to talk to people. But I am a more informed representative and advocate if I'm hearing from residents. But I have to the point of your question, I've been shocked at the number of people tuning in digitally to our hearings, whether it's my committee hearings or legislative meetings from the council. And we've seen the same thing with ANC meetings. There's really been an explosion of participation. So I'm excited about what this means going forward. In a representative democracy, we do better and it works better if we're hearing from people and if people are involved. So so much of the work that I've done is been around making it easier for people to engage their local government, and seeing this level of attention and participation has really been uplifting to me, and it's something that I think will absolutely carry past COVID.
Well, after it's all said and done, and we look at how many people actually view, like you said, hearings and public meetings, it's almost like, duh, why didn't we figure this out
That's
before?
right.
You know, so, but I want to thank you so much for taking a few minutes of your time to join us and to talk about, what's going on with the at-large council member Robert White, and what we can look forward to in 2021, and to feel free to come back anytime, because
I,
this is our way to communicate what's happening legislatively out of your
I
office.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will absolutely be back. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. All right. Well, you all have a happy holiday. I know the little ones are looking forward to somebody coming down the chimney.
That's right. But look, Santa don't pay no bills in my house, so I'm going to tell them who brought most of these presents.
I hear you. All right. Thank you so much, Councilmember White.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.